Well, this is Chris. Welcome back again. We are on, the date is April 12th, the year of our Savior, 2016. April 12th, 2016, and this is going to be Bible study number 27. Yes, Bible study number 27, and the title of this Bible study is going to be Phariseeism. Yes, Phariseeism. So we touched base upon that last time as we finished Mystery Babylon. So just going to kind of delve into a little historical perspective, because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to dealing with Phariseeism. So we need to look at the historical perspective, what was going on in Jerusalem at the time of Christ and after, and even before. All right, so Phariseeism. A religious party or school among the Jews at the time of Christ, so-called Parashim, the Aramaic form of the Hebrew word Parushim, separated. The chief sects among the Jews were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes, who may be described respectively as the formalists, the freethinkers, and the Puritans. A knowledge of the opinions and practices of the Pharisees at the time of Christ is of great importance for entering deeply into the genius of the Christian religion. A current perusal of the Gospels is significant to show that Christ's teaching was, in some respects, thoroughly antagonistic to theirs. Yes, Christ was antagonistic to the teachings of Phariseeism. He denounced them in the biggest language, as we touched before, in Matthew 15, 7 through 8, all the way through, so the four Gospels, and Luke 6, 28, etc., etc. So, to understand the Pharisees is, by contrast, an aid toward understanding the spirit of uncorrupted Christianity. All right, number one, the fundamental principle of the Pharisees, common to them with all Orthodox modern Jews, is that by the side of the written law regarded as a summary of the principles and general laws of the Hebrew people, there was an oral law to complete and to explain the written law, given to Moses on Mount Sinai and transmitted by him by word of mouth. The first portion of the Talmud, called the Mishnah, or the second law, contains this oral law. So now we have not only God's law and his instruction, we have an oral law to explain God's law. And that leads to a lot of confusion. So you see right here, and I'm reading right out of the Westminster Dictionary of the Bible, and it already mentions Phariseeism and the connection to the Talmud. Now, a lot of people, a lot of Christians are very ignorant when it comes to the Talmud and what it is. So this is known as the second law. It is a digest of the Jewish traditions and a compendium of the whole ritual law. And it came at length to be esteemed far above the sacred text. So once again, just as like Roman Catholicism, elevating tradition of the elders, elevating tradition, we're elevating the oral law, we're elevating something other than the Word of God. We're elevating extra biblical or outside the Word of God. Number two, while it is the aim of Jesus to call men to the law of God itself as the supreme guide of life, the Pharisees, on the pretense of maintaining it intact, multiplied minute precepts and distinctions to such an extent that the whole life of the Israelite was hemmed in and burdened on every side by instructions so numerous and trifling that the law was almost, if not wholly, lost sight of. The traditions, as they were called, had long been gradually accumulating. Of the trifling character of these regulations, innumerable instances are to be found in the Mishnah, or the Talmud. Such were the washings before they could eat bread, and the special minuteness with which the forms of this washing were prescribed. Their bathing when they returned from the market, their washing of cups, pots, brazen vessels, etc. Their fasting twice in the week, Luke 18:12. Such were their tithings, Matthew 23:23, and such finally were those minute and vexatious extensions of the law of the Sabbath, which must have converted God's gracious ordinance of the Sabbath's rest into a burden and a pain. So what we see is the traditions of men, as Christ calls it, nullifies the commandments of God. And there's reference here, Matthew 12, 1 through 13, Mark 3, 1 through 6, and Luke 13, verses 10 through 17. Number 3. It was a leading aim of the Redeemer to teach men that true piety consisted not in forms but in substance, not in outward observances, but in an inward spirit. The whole system of the Pharisaic piety led to exactly opposite conclusions. The lowliness of piety was, according to the teaching of Jesus, an inseparable concomitant of its reality. But the Pharisees sought mainly to attract the attention, to excite the admiration of men. Matthew 6, verses 2, 6 and 16, chapter 23, 5 through 6, and Luke 14, verse 7. Indeed, the whole spirit of their religion was summed up not in confession of sin and in humility, but in a proud self-righteousness at variance with any true conception of man's relation to either God or his fellow creatures. Number 4, with all their pretense to piety, they were in reality avaricious, sensual, and dissolute. Matthew 23, verse 25, John 8, verse 7. They looked with contempt upon every nation but their own. Luke 10, 29. Finally, instead of endeavoring to fulfill the great end of the disposition whose truths they professed to teach, and thus bringing men to the hope of Israel, they devoted their energies to making converts to their own narrow views, who, with all the zeal of a proselytes, were more exclusive and more bitterly opposed to the truth than they were themselves. Matthew 22, verse 15. Excuse me. 5. The Pharisees had in early days secured the popular favor and thereby acquired considerable political influence. This influence was greatly increased by the extension of the Pharisees over the whole land and the majority which they obtained in the Sanhedrin. Their number reached more than 6,000 under the Herods. Now, under the end quote. So that's taken actually from Smith's Bible Dictionary under Pharisees, 2003, pages 507 to 508. Now, Herods is referring to the Herodian dynasty. Now, in all probability, the Pharisees originated in the period before the Maccabean War in a reaction against the Hellenizing spirit. Now, Hellenizing is referring to the Greek or the Greek paganism. So, which appeared before the Jews and manifested itself in the readiness of a part of the people to adopt Greek customs. So they're trying to keep paganism out of their midst. Those who regarded these practices with abhorrence and their spread with alarm were incited to strict and open conformity to the Mosaic law. End quote. That's from the Westminster Dictionary of the Bible under Pharisees, page 476. That's 1944. All right. Now, continuing the 6th point under Smith's Bible Dictionary, one of the fundamental doctrines of the Pharisees was a belief in a future state. They appear to have believed in a resurrection of the dead, very much in the same sense as the early Christians. They also believed in a divine providence acting side by side with the free will of man. End quote. That's by Schaff. Number 7. It is to add that it would be a great mistake to suppose that the Pharisees were wealthy and luxurious, much more that they had degenerated into the vices which were imputed to some of the Roman popes and cardinals during the 2,000 years preceding the Reformation. Josephus compared the Pharisees to the sect of the Stoics. He says that they lived frugally, in no respect giving to luxury. We are not to suppose that there were not many individuals among them who were upright and pure, for there were such men as Nicodemus, Gamaliel, and of course we know Josephus of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea, and Paul. And that's taken from Smith Bible Dictionary, page 508. So we see here that, yeah, they were disciplined, and they were not given over to the simony and the immorality that you see for over 1,000 years, or that existed in Papal Rome. All right, so what led to Jesus Christ scathing denunciation against the Pharisees. All right, well, okay. Well, and then if you look at the map before, you look at an ancient biblical map, you'll find that the kingdom of Edom is below the kingdom of Judah. It's south of the kingdom of Judah. And then above that, you have the kingdom of Israel. All right, so the Edomites' original country, according to the Tanakh or Masoretic text, stretched forth from the Sinai Peninsula as far as Kadesh Barnea. Southward it reached as far as Eilat, which was the seaport of Edom. On the north of Edom was the territory of Moab. The boundary between Moab and Edom was the Wadi Zerad. The ancient capital of Edom was Basra. According to Genesis, Esau's descendants settled in this land after displacing the Horites. It was also called the land of Seir. Mount Seir appears to have been strongly identified with them and may have been a cultic site. In the time of Amaziah, 838 BC, Sela, or Petra, was on its principal stronghold, Eilat and Ezion Geber, its seaports. Now, if we could look at a map, you'll be able to see, looking into about 830 BC. If you're looking at the biblical map, just remember that Edom is down below Judah, but there is definitely boundaries there at the time. All right, so then we see John Hyrcanus. Okay, so John Hyrcanus was a Hasmonean or Maccabean leader of the 2nd century BC who reigned from 134 to 104 BC, and he died at 104 BC. The Maccabees means hammer, and we're a Jewish, or referring to, in this case, Jewish at that time is referring to Judah. Yes, from the tribe of Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. A lot of times people are so biblically ignorant. They're like, "Oh, Judah is Israel, Israel is Judah." No, Israel had 12 sons, and only one of them was named Judah. Okay. So we see right now, you have the Maccabeans and the Hasmonean dynasty. This was a pure Israelite. This was a pure Israelite dynasty, okay? It did not have an infusion of the other races around that area. So they founded the Hasmonean dynasty, which ruled from 164 BC to 63 BC, reasserting the Israelite religion, expounding the boundaries of the land of Israel by conquest, which included instances of forced conversion, reducing the influence of Hellenism, which was Greek culture, and Hellenistic Judaism, which was a mixture. All right, so we see here that you have the Seleucid Empire. Now, this is at the time what surrounded the Maccabees. There's the Seleucid Empire, which was a Greek Macedonian state created by Seleucus the First Nicator, following the carve-up of the empire created by Alexander the Great following his death. So when Alexander the Great, Greco, that's part of the Greco-Roman period, well, when he died, his kingdom was divided into 4 parts, and this is one of 4. All right, so the Seleucid Empire was a major center of Hellenistic or Greek paganism culture, which maintained the preeminence of Greek customs and where a Greek Macedonian political elite dominated. All right, and that's kind of above where Israel was. So if we add maps, obviously through the Bible study, you'll be able to see it more clearly. So we see the Hasmonean dynasty. What is the Hasmonean dynasty? Because we're talking about the Maccabees. These were Judahites. Okay, they were Israelites. The Hasmonean dynasty. The Hasmonean dynasty was the ruling dynasty of Judea and surrounding regions during the classical antiquity. Remember, classical is referring to the Greek and the Roman civilization, also referring to in Western history as the Age of Antiquity. Between approximately 140 and 116 BC, the dynasty ruled semi-autonomously from the Seleucids in the region of Judea. From 110 BC, with the Seleucid Empire disintegrating, the dynasty became fully independent, expanded into the neighboring regions of Galilee, Iturea, Perea, and Idumea, Edom, and Samaria, and took the title Basileus. Some modern scholars refer to this period as an independent kingdom of Israel. So this was Israel's kingdom, and they controlled the nation of Edom and their surrounding communities. They were a pretty powerful stronghold, because remember, there had to be pure Israelite blood to maintain for the coming of the Messiah, as first prophesied in Genesis 3:15. All right, so we see here, we see in 63 BC, the kingdom was conquered by the Roman Republic, broken up and set up as a Roman client state. The kingdom had survived for 103 years before yielding to the Herodian dynasty in 37 BC. Even then, Herod the Great, an Edomite, Herod was an Edomite. Herod was not an Israelite, folks. That's important to understand. Tried to bolster the legitimacy of his reign by marrying a Hasmonean or Judahite princess, Miriam, and planning to drown or murder the last male Hasmonean heir, Aristobulus III, at his Jericho palace. So basically what Herod did, Herod was an Edomite. So you have to understand, folks, Judah got tired of the pestering neighbors of Edom coming across the border, doing their little skirmishes, and going back home. So the hammer goes down there and puts the hammer on Edom and says, look, you either convert or I'm going to kill every one of you. And they said, oh, wow, we really like the Israel faith. We really like, because Israel is Christianity, folks. Christianity is as much in the Old Testament as it is in the New Testament. So they said, oh yeah, we convert, absolutely. We don't want a throat cut. So now, if you look at the map, now Judah and Edom are now blending together, okay? And so now we're referring more to a geographical region than just a racial perspective. Very important to understand. Herod, who is an Edomite, okay? Herod was the one that tried to murder, destroy Jesus Christ. Because, and that's reference to being a child of Satan. He was serving Satan. So he murdered the last true Israelite or Levitical high priest, whatever you want to call him, Israelite, Hebrew, Levitical, maybe he was Judahite, but from the tribe of Judah or Israel, or more specifically, just call him, he was the last true Hebrew high priest. And then Herod, who used the Roman Empire, went in there and slaughtered and did a lot of damage, and he ruled that area. And that's where you have the beginning of the Herodian or the Edomite dynasty. Now, Edom is not Israel. You'll put that challenge to biblical scholars. Edom is not Israel. All right. Edom is also known as Mount Seir. All right, so that's what. Let's move forward. Now, I mentioned classical antiquity. What is classical antiquity? Also known as the classical era. Classical period or classical age is a broad term for a long period of cultural history centered on the Mediterranean Sea, comprising the interlocking civilizations of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, collectively known as the Greco-Roman world. It is the period in which Greek and Roman society flourished and wielded great influence throughout Europe, North Africa, and Middle East. All right, so we see Wikipedia under classical antiquity. All right, so the Hasmonean dynasty, just to begin here a little bit, the Hasmonean dynasty, which was the true Israelite or Levitical priesthood, you have Jonathan Aphus, 153 to 143 BC, that's the one. Then you have John Hyrcanus I, 134 to 104 BC, Aristobulus I, Alexander Jannaeus, John Hyrcanus II, Aristobulus II, John Hyrcanus II, Antigonus, son of Aristobulus II. And then we have Aristobulus III, the last grandson of the Hasmoneans, paternal grandson of Aristobulus II, and brother of Herod's wife, Miriam, second wife of Herod. So we see that Herod married the last high priest, and then married the last high priest's sister, and then murdered him, had him killed. All right, so we see during the time of the Hasmonean ruler, John Hyrcanus, 134 to 104 BC, Judea conquered Edom, or Idumea, another name for Edom, and forced the Edomites to convert to Judaism. The Edomites were gradually integrated into the Judean nation. That's from the tribe of Judah, and some of them reached the high-ranking positions. In the days of Alexander Jannaeus, Edomite Antipas was appointed governor of Edom. His son Antipater, father of Herod the Great, was the chief advisor to Hasmonean Hyrcanus II and managed to establish a good relationship with the Roman Republic, who at that time, in 63 BC, extended their influence over the region following the conquest of Syria and intervention in a civil war in Judea. So we see here that these Edomites gained in a position of office and that were really connected with the true Levitical priesthood. And then eventually they got in relation with Rome, and then you have the overthrow of the end of the Hasmonean, or the Levitical priesthood, and the beginning of the Edomite, the beginning of the Idumea, the beginning of the Herodian or Herod dynasty. Okay. So Julius Caesar appointed Antipater to be procurator of Judea in 47 BC. Now he was an Edomite, and he appointed his sons Phasael and Herod to be governors of Jerusalem and Galilee, respectively. Antipater was murdered in 43 BC. However, his sons managed to hold the reins of power and were elevated to the rank of tetrarchs in 41 BC by Mark Antony. All right, so we see Herod. Herod was born around 74 BC in the south, or Idumea was the most southern region. He was the second son of Antipater, the Idumean, a high-ranked official under Ethnarch Hyrcanus II, and Sipra, a Nabatean. Herod was practicing Judaism, or the practice of the Hebrew religion, as many Edomites and Nabateans had been commingled with the Jews and appointed their customs. These Judaized Edomites were not considered Jewish by the dominant Pharisaic tradition. So you have the true tribe of Judah, and then you have these Edomites that were mingled in, but they were never fully accepted. And Herod was one of them. Herod was an Edomite. And that's why he married the last high priest, married his sister, and then had him killed. He was ambitious. He was very ambitious. So even though Herod may have considered himself of the Jewish faith, he was not, or the Judaic faith, he was not considered Jewish or from the tribe of Judah by the observant and nationalist Jews of Judea. And Jew is just meaning originally meant a descendant of Judah. Now it's changing into just a location, a geographical location. So a local supporter of Hyrcanus II, that was one of the Levitical priests, Antipater, appointed Herod governor of Galilee at 25, and his older brother, Phasael, governor of Jerusalem. He enjoyed the backing of Rome, but his brutality was condemned by the Sanhedrin. So he had his problems. 2 years later, Antigonus, Hyrcanus' nephew, took the throne from his uncle with the help of the Parthians. Herod fled to Rome to plead with the Romans to restore him the power. So Herod lost his power. He went to Rome, and there he was elected king of the Jews. Herod was elected king of the Jews, but he was an Edomite. He was a converted Jew by the Roman Senate. Josephus puts this in the year of the consulship of Calvinus and Pollio, 40 BC. but Appian places it in 39 BC. Herod went back to Judea to win his kingdom from Antiochus, and at that same time he married the teenage niece of Antiochus, Miriam, known as Miriam the First, in an attempt to secure a claim to the throne and gain some Jewish favor. So he's trying to marry in to the priesthood, the true Levitical priesthood, because he was an Edomite. He's trying to gain the respect of the people. However, Herod already had a wife, Doris, and a 3-year-old son, Antipater, and chose therefore to banish Doris and her child. So not very loyal to his own family. 3 years later, Herod and the Romans finally captured Jerusalem and executed Antiochus. Herod took the role as sole ruler of Judea and the title of Basileus, Greek for king, for himself, ushering in the Herodian dynasty, the end of the Hasmonean, or the end of the Levitical priesthood or dynasty, and Herodian or Edomite dynasty, and ending with the Hasmonean dynasty. Josephus reports this as being in the year of the consulship of Agrippa and Gallus, 37 BC, but also says it was exactly 27 years after Jerusalem fell to Pompey, which would indicate 36 BC. All right, so we see that the Romans accomplished nothing worthy of note. All right, so according to Josephus, Herod ruled for 37 years, 34 of them after capturing Jerusalem. All right, so we see that we're learning about the history of what was going on. You know, a lot of times people just use this blank term, oh, Jewish, or this or that, and we have to understand the historical perspective. What happened there? That's very important, because I see what's going on here, a very dangerous thing of putting other things in front of Christ. Putting race, saying, well, you don't have to be saved or you don't have to follow Jesus Christ because you're justified by race. Well, that's very dangerous, folks. That's another gospel and that's another Jesus. So we see that Herod, the great siege of Jerusalem, 37 BC, was the final step in his campaign to secure the throne of Judea. Aided by Roman forces provided by Marcus Antonius, or Mark Antony, Herod was able to capture the city. So we're going to pick it up next time. So thank you. Search all things, and God bless you.